Thank you for that. Well, yes, if you look at the global tire prices, we're trading at a two-year lows onto this one. And even as you look at the data, the year-on-year global production has been increasing, but the consumption clearly not keeping a pace. 2021 was a great year. You saw 10.9% of a run-up when you see on an year-on-year global consumption. But that is because 2020 wasn't such a great year. But then after that, look at the kind of yearly growth 2022 has put in, and the expectations from 2023 also not very strong there on the markets there. But joining us is Rajiv Budhraja. He is Director General at ATMA. Rajiv, hi, good to have you. First of all, your sense on the rubber prices itself. We do understand that this is a peak arrival season in India and various other globally producing countries as well. So will you say the decline in prices is, because of that too?
Well, rubber prices have been muted both globally and in India, as you rightly said. One, because of the peak season, and secondly, because and more so because the demand from China, the domestic demand that was always there, has been extremely sort of subdued. And we know for reasons why. I think these are the two main reasons that while on the production side, I think the major producing countries, especially Thailand, African countries like the Ivory Coast, they have been very, very bullish with their production, but the offtake has been rather muted.
That's exactly
so that explains the current global and domestic pricing of rubber.
Clearly. Rajiv, that is my next question. If you could put a number to that, on what kind of demand slowdown have we seen, especially from the Indian companies?
Well, in India, it's essentially the OE demand, which has kind of been somewhat sluggish, particularly in the last 2 quarters. But going forward, I think January onwards, particularly the entire H1 CY23, there are expectations that the offtake from OEMs would be on the rise, and then obviously it would get reflected on the rubber offtake as well. On the replacement side, I think industry has been doing well. Exports have been rather good. Last year was 55% growth over FY21. Okay. And this year also, I think it's going to be a decent double-digit growth of tires from India. So factoring all that, I think January onwards, the scenario looks to be somewhat better. Last 2 quarters, I must say that have been slightly, I won't call that disappointing, but lower than the expected levels.
Rajiv, there have been various statements from the rubber growers themselves of the kind of decline that they've seen in prices. The input costs have been increasing, but the rubber prices have been stagnant or even on the weaker side. How do you see those statements? One is something that is being done that side too.
Well, on the rubber side, it's a very peculiar situation. While the prices have been somewhat, subdued, the market arrivals are also not very encouraging. In fact, this is perhaps the first time in recent years that tire companies are faced with this situation that, even in the peak production season, the availability concerns continue. And that's mainly because of the prevailing price situation. The growers are not really in favor or support of converting latex into sheet rubber, which is what, tire companies would be sourcing mainly from India. So while rubber overall, yes, production may be there, its conversion to sheet rubber for use by tire industry, and also, for further conversion, that remains to be a concern. This is very, very peculiar phenomena, if one may say, which has set in this year only, and needs to be addressed, by the government, by the rubber board, by way of encouraging the growers to convert latex into sheet rubber, a more value-added product, which can then be utilized by the tire sector.
Fair point. Rajiv, also, the International Rubber Study Group has put out some numbers for this year and the next as well. For this year, they're expecting the global growth at 1.9%. Next year, it is put at around 2.8%. So on year-on-year basis, a slightly better number, but much lesser than what we saw with 2021 to be. What's your sense on the overall demand growth when we look at the Indian markets?
Well, I would say a 2 to 3% growth over last year's number looks to be a very likely scenario for India, on the rubber consumption side. Last year by itself was a record high, and I think we are looking at anywhere between 3 to 4% growth over that.
And with the prices, you expect them to stay within this 140 to 150 rupees per kg mark?
Very, very hard to say. I wouldn't like to make any comment on the rubber pricing, the future likely scenario. But I think a lot will depend upon how China factor plays out.
Fair point that. We'll take it to that. Thank you so much, Rajiv, as always, for joining us. So the next couple of quarters, the previous one and this one seems slower. But as Rajiv pointed out, January seems like a better start of the new year and the quarter as well when it comes for tyre and the rubber industry there. But with that, that's all the time that we have on Halftime Report. Stay tuned. Business Lunch will take all the action forward.